And we really kind of wanted to bring this conversation to the forefront this month because of next month being National Donor Sabbath Month. We really kind of wanted to get everybody's gears turning and the brain working as to what can we do as a community in the times that we're in right now to be able to still celebrate National Donor Sabbath Month. And we thought this might be a great way to kind of get everybody's brainstorming activities going. I will hand it right on over to Juan because he is going to know exactly where to pick up from there, right?
Well, I mean, Larry and I have done this kind of a dog and pony show in the past. Uh, uh, we've been co-conspirators for a long time. I think I'll start by saying that so often in American society we tend to work as nuclear family, and it is times like these that show us how important extended family are to our lives. Some of our extended families in times of tragedy, as Larry mentioned, should not be expected to carry the intimate weight of grief that a family goes through in situations like this. So, because of the already established uh, connections and relationships, then I think the church, being one, or other faith communities, um, are prime places that should provide for the sustaining healing work long term that this kind of tragedy requires. And not just a tragedy, but then what happens after that. And in this case, in Garrett's case, it was a story of death, but of resurrection. We didn't have to wait till the end of time to see Garrett's life resurrected. We saw it in those recipients that received his life. And the church then became a spot of remembering. And in some real ways, I know in my own life, Garrett continues to be a source of my own remembering, in my own resurrection. And he's sneaky sometimes with that stuff too, by the way. I still remember the first All Saints Day after Garrett's death, where we went to light the candle and the whole place caught on fire, the whole setup in front of the church. And I was like, you little sneaky fellow, there you go again. Because, by the way, I have to say something about Garrett. Garrett and I had an interesting relationship. Garrett can be mischievous, and Pastor Juan sometimes had to get daddy on him. Um, and so again, what Larry's describing is a continuing relationship. So you saw his baptism picture. It was a community where that saw these children grow up. So as you are dealing with your families, uh, begin to help them see what other networks of relationships. Who are the kids that play with uh, with them? Who are the family members that they connect with? Um, it doesn't have to be just children in this case, it could be adults. What are their networks beyond that immediate family that's going through this particular situation? Because sometimes when you're in the midst of grief, you don't know what you need. Larrabee didn't know she was hungry. She was like a zombie for days, right? But she had a group of people in the church who would put food in front of her and said, you need to eat, you need to drink. Have you gone to the bathroom? Um, that group of folks that were there in the hospital in those early 48 hours, uh, I still remember showing up and the NICU nurse said to me, I've never seen anything like this. Uh, we kind of took over the hospital. Um, God bless them, for putting up with us. Um, and by the way, that community in those early days, this early 48 hours, was a community where we prayed and cried a lot together, but we also laughed a lot together and ate together. Um, and so again, it's about holding that space. And although we didn't know it at the time, because by the way, I think the early 24 to 48 hours, as difficult as they were also hours of uncertainty. What we didn't know was, though, that this community was already providing the healing power that Larrabee and Patrick and Avery needed in such a time. And so kind of asking those questions and And at times with the family that's going through a tragedy, as you are walking alongside them, is wondering in curiosity what those networks look like. The same thing happens when you're then discussing issues of what do we do next. I know that when LOPA approached Larrabee and Patrick, it was their church family, and I was blessed to be with them in that room when the LOPA representative met with them, and honored to be there. And that's when I really learned about this, Larrabee. I'd never been through that questionnaire. I'd never, I learned as a pastor at 20, however it was, 28. And it made a huge impact in the way I've treated these situations in the future. And in fact, I've had a few cases where I've then been the one who said, have you contacted LOPA? Here's something you might be able to do in this circumstance to give life. So that same community that provided for care and health and support, then that community also creates a system of trust, because these decisions about organ donation are rooted in trust. So those systems of trust then are being built without you even knowing it, and you're affecting other lives and other people. I had no idea as a pastor that I would companion a few more families through this. In fact, when I went through this with Larry and Patrick, I prayed that I would never go through an experience like that again. But it was that experience of community long term, and I've seen the healing. So, for example, we know that couples that lose a child have a huge rate of divorce. I can tell you, I don't think that Patrick and Larry would be together today if it wasn't for the church family. I don't think they would have well-adjusted children, as well-adjusted as teenagers can be, if it wasn't for the church family. Because we saw Avery, and then we saw Nathaniel coming to the family of faith. And again, that community providing for healing, for wholeness, for conversation, for food, but more importantly, for the kind of healing community that cannot be put on the backs of one individual or the grandparent or the aunt. That it just requires a much larger network. And I've often wondered, as you all have conversations with folk, for those who are non-religious, what are those networks? Is it neighborhood groups? Is it other social groups that they're a part of? Because I can't imagine healing being able to happen without community. And then I think for those of you who are family advocates or other volunteers, you might begin to wonder, what communities do you have for continued healing and care? Because you all are dealing with folks going through their worst day of their life, their worst moment. You too carry a particular burden. How are you creating networks? And you will be amazed how often those networks then provide you a platform to discuss these important issues of organ donation. Because of Garrett, I can much more confidently stand before congregations and say that organ donation for me is not just a practical issue, but it's a theological issue. It's an issue of stewardship of the body that God has given me. And what a better stewardship of this body than to give of myself sacrificially if something happened to me. And I tell that to my children. And that's the interesting thing. All these children that were little bitty when Garrett died, or as I like to say in my writing, it's the day that Garrett took his leaving from us. Now they're grown. Garrett is part of their story. But the only way that happened was because of this community called the church. That every year still reminded of that story. And recently when I told my kids that I was going to do this thing with Larrabee, my youngest said, "Oh, that's right. That's the organ donation, right? Garrett gave organs." I said, "Yes, he did." No, by the way, my youngest was not even born yet when Garrett died. And I said, "Yes, he did." And he said, "Yeah, that's very important. And I want to do that too." So here's the 11-year-old who's normalized for himself that this is what you do. Again, it's because of the community that's having the conversations over time. I remember, Larry, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember the time when you looked at me and you told me, it's okay to talk to me about Garrett. It's okay. And so since that moment, in those first 48 to 72 hours after he left us, uh, we normalized that conversation. And that conversation includes that Garrett, in the end, gave the gift of life. He gave resurrection, literal resurrection, to people around him. I mean, as a Christian theologian, I cannot imagine a more obvious and incarnate example of the story that we tell Sunday after Sunday. And so I think these communities that we lean on provide not just a healing presence, but also provide a way in which we tell the narrative, and the narrative over time becomes a healing narrative. Again, Larrabee and all of you who've suffered the death of a loved one like this, especially a child, will never heal. It's impossible to heal. But it is possible to be in a healing process over time. Over time. I know for me, and I mean, Garrett wasn't my child. He could have been my child, but he wasn't. I know that I myself will never get over. But because we tell his story, and one of the stories we tell is organ donation, he provides a balm each and every time we tell the story. And each and every time I remember the community that gathered on those days to hold vigil and began that healing process in themselves, in that hospital, and then in the parents and grandparents and great-grandparents on that day. So I'm going to quit talking because I could get to preaching so easily. And I'll love to hear your thoughts and questions.
With National Donor Sabbath Month coming up, to keep that in your mind, to know that this is an opportunity and a place that we have a platform to be able to tell all the great things about organ donation. So if you ever have any questions, if you have any questions about that as to, what should I do or what do you recommend? Juan, do you kind of want to elaborate on that?
It's a way for us to still tell the story, but also hopefully expand the conversation. I'm still amazed at how many people, no matter how many times we say it, have not heard the importance of this or what this is about. You say LOPA. For me, I know exactly what you're talking about. They don't. You talk about organ donation. I'm in South Louisiana now, and there are all these misconceptions at times about how the church feels about organ donation. So we're hopeful that as we host it again in the church, through this portal virtually, we tell the stories, others share their story through the chat interface, that we'll be able to engage the community in a different way. It never takes the place of an in-person gathering, but I'm really excited about the potential that this has to get out there and get more clicks so that more people can know about the importance of organ and tissue donation.
We still see people say they are unsure if their religion supports organ donation. How would Reverend Juan recommend that we ask our own church families to begin the discussion of religion and donation? Good question.
Yeah. So I know every theological tradition has their, so I would say set up a time with your pastor or priest and sit with them and ask them. I think most of us welcome those questions. In United Methodism, we believe that God gave us these bodies we live in and that we're to be good stewards of those bodies. We do believe that our bodies will be, at the end of time, will be physically resurrected, but we do not believe that organ donation puts any hazard for that to take place at the end of time. And I say that because for some traditions that this is a metaphysical question, right? For us, it's not. We believe that the best thing you can do with your body and being good stewards of that body is to offer these organs for someone else to have life. We have an understanding of the body that's communal in nature. It's what benefits the common life of the community. But you set up a time with your priest or pastor and ask these questions. I know that if you go to the LOPA website, there's some information about how that takes place. I know for some religious traditions, they have understandings of the blood flow and how it's done. So you want to educate and bring that material to them.
We do have our faith resources on our website at lopa.org/clergy. So you can read a lot of our resources that we have on there as well to see if maybe that's something that you want to share, maybe to start that conversation within your church community.